They all said it couldn't be done. They laughed. They told me to be realistic, find a different path. They said the damage was too deep, the odds were too long, and my dream was just too big. And for a little while, I almost believed them. Their voices were the only thing I could hear. A chorus of doubt, a symphony of disbelief, echoing in the spaces where my confidence used to be. It's a familiar story, isn't it? Everyone has doubters. People who say, you're not good enough, not smart enough, not capable enough. And the easiest thing in the world is to argue with them, to waste your breath trying to convince them, to spend all your energy fighting a battle of words you can't win. I didn't do that. I never argued. Instead, I made one decision. I would work in silence and let my success be the only argument I ever made. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about resilience. It's about what happens when you stop trying to prove other people wrong and start trying to prove yourself right. My name is Lisa. I'm 29 years old. For years, my identity was simple. It was stitched right onto my uniform. I was a soldier. Every day started with a clear mission. There was structure, purpose, a sense of belonging to something bigger than myself. The discipline was the bedrock of our existence. We were trained to plan meticulously, execute with precision, and lead with integrity. These weren't just rules, they were the principles that kept us alive. In that world, I knew exactly who I was. But then one day, it all just ends. The transition from military to civilian life isn't a parade. For a lot of us, it's a silent, disorienting fall. The uniform comes off, and with it, the entire structure that defined your world disappears. Suddenly, the mission is gone. The team is scattered. That clarity is replaced by a deafening ambiguity. People see a veteran, but they don't see the person inside, struggling to navigate a world that doesn't run on the same principles. For me, the silence was overwhelming. The outside world didn't have a clear enemy, no defined objective. But my internal world was even more chaotic. I didn't come home from my last deployment the same. Nobody does. I was hit by an IED, and the concussion left more than physical scars. It left a quiet fracture inside, something that splintered and spread in the stillness of civilian life. At first it was migraines, then a short fuse, a constant simmering anger I couldn't explain. The VA diagnosed it as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. It's a clinical term, but to me, it felt like a ghost of the battlefield that had followed me home. It sat in the passenger seat of my car, stood behind me in line at the grocery store, and whispered that the world was no longer safe. My friends, my family, they tried to help. But their advice felt like it was for a stranger. Just relax, they'd say. Move on. Maybe you should aim for something less stressful. They saw a broken man, not a warrior in need of a new mission. Their words, meant to be kind, became the very voices of doubt. They said I'd never be the person I was, that I needed to accept my new limitations, that the dream I had of building something of my own was no longer realistic. Be practical, they'd say. And with every well-intentioned warning, the walls closed in. They were writing my story for me, and it was a tragedy. The story of a man who served his country, only to be defeated by the peace he fought for. They said I'd never succeed. And the most dangerous part was that I was starting to believe them. This was rock bottom, a place of total isolation where the future you once imagined is just gone. Have you ever felt that? That feeling of being untethered, where your past self is a distant memory and your future self seems like an impossible fiction. This is where the doubters live. They thrive in that void because their story of your failure is the only one being told. My days became formless. The military discipline I'd relied on for so long suddenly felt useless. Waking up had no purpose. There were no drills, no objectives, just long, empty hours and the ghost of who I used to be. The anxiety and anger from the PTSD made simple things feel like navigating a minefield. A crowded room felt like a threat. A sudden noise would make my heart race. I was living in a country I fought for, but I felt like a foreigner in my own life. The suggestions kept coming. Get a simple job. Go on disability. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. They were trying to build a safe, comfortable cage for me. But a cage is still a cage. Their vision for my life was a quiet surrender. And every time I tried to explain the fire I still felt inside, the ambition to build, to create, to lead again, they'd look at me with pity. That look. The one that says, He just doesn't get it. He's not well. I learned the hard way that trying to prove someone wrong often just makes them dig in their heels, creating resistance and exhausting you emotionally. I was spending all my energy fighting their perception of me, and it was a war I couldn't win. I was arguing with ghosts, and the only person I was defeating was myself. It was then that I discovered the profound power of silence. The idea is simple. Work hard in silence. Let your success make the noise. It's a mantra about focusing on your work without needing applause along the way. And it resonated deep within me. What if I just stopped talking? What if I stopped trying to sell them a vision they couldn't see? What if I just disappeared and started to build? This was the beginning of the silent grind. It didn't start with a grand plan, but with one small decision. I got up at 500, not because I had to, but because discipline was something I could control. The world was quiet, the doubters were asleep, the phone wasn't ringing, it was just me. I started reading everything I could about business and marketing. I used my veteran benefits, the same ones people said were just for getting by, to find online courses that translated military planning into business strategy. Every mission starts with a plan, objectives, resources, risk assessment. So I planned my own. Objective: build a business from scratch. Resources: my savings, my time, and the unwavering discipline forged in me. The risks: everything. Failure, financial ruin, and confirming every doubt anyone ever had. It was a lonely road. There were no social media updates, no grand announcements. My workshop was my garage. My planning sessions were at my kitchen table in the middle of the night. I was like a seed planted underground. On the surface, nothing was happening. But beneath the surface, a root system was forming. I was learning, failing, adjusting, and learning again. Each small mistake was a private lesson, not a public failure. This silent period was about building inner resilience. My motivation shifted from extrinsic, the desire to prove them wrong, to intrinsic, the deep, personal need to prove to myself that I was still capable. And that shift changed everything. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt underestimated, take a second to subscribe. We're building a community here based on resilience and the power of the quiet grind. Your journey is valid, and we're here to remind you of that. Now let's get back to what happens when the silence finally gets broken. Every journey of silent work has a turning point. It's not some explosion of success, but the first real sign that the work is paying off. It's the moment the sprout finally breaks through the soil. For me, it wasn't $1 million contract. It was the first client. After months of quiet preparation, building a website, defining my services, practicing my pitch to an empty room, I took a step into the light. I reached out to a small, struggling local business. I didn't give them a long story about my past. I simply presented a plan, clear, concise, and detailed, just like a mission briefing. I outlined their problem, the objective, the steps to get there, and the results they could measure. The owner was skeptical. He'd heard 100 pitches, but something about the sheer clarity of the plan cut through the noise. He said yes, not with enthusiasm, but with a "let's see what you've got" attitude. And then my training took over. I executed that plan with the precision I was taught. Deadlines were met. Communication was clear. Every action had a purpose. I poured every ounce of that silent grind into that one project, because it was about more than just his business. It was the proof. The first brick in the wall I was building. Weeks turned into a month. His customer engagement went up. His sales followed. It wasn't a miracle. It was the result of a disciplined process. One afternoon, he called me. The skepticism in his voice was gone, replaced with something I hadn't heard directed at me in years: respect. He said, "I don't know how you did it, but it's working." That was the turning point. It wasn't about the money. It was about validation, but not the kind I'd been chasing before. This wasn't about proving a doubter wrong. It was about seeing a plan, born in silence and forged in discipline, create real-world results. This success was a fact. And you can't argue with a fact. That first win became my foundation. It proved to me that the skills I thought were obsolete were actually more valuable than ever. The warrior hadn't been broken. He was just waiting for a new mission. And now, he had one. There's a beautiful, undeniable power in results. You can debate an opinion, you can dismiss a dream, but you cannot argue with success. My success didn't arrive like a lightning strike. It grew steadily, like a rising tide. That first client led to 2 more, all by word of mouth. The hum was turning into a buzz. My business, born in a garage from desperation and discipline, started to take on a life of its own. I hired my first employee, another veteran who was feeling that same sense of lost identity. I didn't have to explain the mission to him. He already understood the language of discipline and accountability. Together, we were building a new unit, a new tribe. Our growth was methodical. Each new project was another mission, planned and executed with military precision. Our reputation grew not from flashy ads, but from a quiet record of excellence. We delivered, consistently. In a world full of noise, our results stood out. And then, a funny thing happened. The doubters started coming back around. The same people who'd told me to be realistic and accept my limitations started to notice the noise my success was making. A family member said, "I saw your company's work for that local brand. Impressive." An old friend called, "I heard you're doing really well. We should catch up." There was no, "I told you so." There was no need for one. The temptation to remind them of their doubt was there. But what was the point? The work had already made the argument. My success was the response. It was the loudest thing in the room, and it said everything that needed to be said. Proving them wrong was never the mission. It was just a byproduct. The real mission was to prove to myself that my skills were not just relevant, but essential. Today, the company thrives. We've won awards and been featured in industry publications. But the success I measure is different. It's in the team of veterans we employ, each one finding a new purpose. It's in the businesses we help grow, creating jobs in our community. And it's in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the discipline and integrity forged on the battlefield are now building a legacy in the boardroom. The ultimate victory wasn't showing them they were wrong. It was creating a reality so compelling that their doubts became irrelevant. So what's the takeaway here? If you're surrounded by people who doubt you, who tell you to shrink your dream to fit their small vision of the world, my advice is this: don't argue. Don't waste your precious energy trying to win a battle of words. They can't see the vision in your head. They haven't walked your path. They don't understand the fire that drives you, and that's okay. It's not their mission to understand. It's yours to execute. Channel that energy into your own silent grind. Wake up early. Stay up late. Let your discipline be your guide, and let your work be your focus. Embrace the silence, because it's in those quiet hours of dedication that you build something real. The desire to prove haters wrong is temporary fuel. The desire to prove yourself right is sustainable energy. Let them underestimate you. Let them write you off. Let them think you've faded away. Because while they're busy talking, you'll be working. While they're busy doubting, you'll be building. And one day, without you ever having to raise your voice, they will hear the noise of your success. It will be undeniable. It will be irrefutable. And it will be the only argument you ever needed to make. Believe in your mission, trust your training, and work in silence. Your success is coming, and it will make all the noise. Thank you for watching. If this message hit home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories about turning adversity into triumph. Keep grinding.